Just by way of a bit of background, the VCOS work commenced back in 2010, and out of the project there were 25 key recommendations about the planning, governance, standards and a whole range of other issues, which I'll go into more detail about, connected to creating greater accessibility in transport. And that was for the community generally, but particularly for people with disabilities and their access to transport. Since this time, VCOS has led an advocacy campaign called the All Aboard campaign. Again, Llewellyn will give more details about that, which has really been advocating for an increase and changes to policy directions and planning for accessible transport. Today we'll hear about some of the issues, the background to the project and the initiatives, and there'll be an opportunity to join with that campaign when Llewellyn does his presentation, and also we'll hear about the initiatives that the City of Boroondara is undertaking through the presentation by Llewellyn. I'll hand over to Llewellyn Rawlins, who's the Strategic Transport Planner in our Traffic and Transport Department at the City of Boroondara, to talk about the local initiatives connected to accessibility.
Hi, I'm going to be standing way back over here because there's a camera down here that I've got to talk into, and hello to Balwyn and Ashburton. I'm Howell Rawlins, I'm a Strategic Transport Planner, and I look at anything to do with how people move around the city in general, but I'm a bit more focused on City of Boroondara now that I work for Council. I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we have in the municipality, and what we're doing at the moment, and some of the plans that we have for the future. Obviously, the future plans are subject to funding and all the rest of it. I'll start with just talking about tram stops, because they're a formidable challenge throughout Melbourne. And what we do know is it's a legislative requirement to make them all DDA compliant, so accessible to everyone. But that's actually a huge challenge given the number of tram stops we've got. We know there needs to be some rationalisation of those tram stops, but the plan is to get them all upgraded by 2032, but there are some interim deadlines in place already. Now you can see some of them popping up in different places, and I think at the moment they're building the easy wins, the easy stops to actually accommodate. But not every location is easy, and some of the locations are quite challenging from the perspective of maybe the local community, local traders, loss of parking, that sort of stuff. But it is really reliant. We can't do this as a council on our own. We really do need state and federal funding to be able to sort of bring these up to scratch. And the best we can do at the moment is just to continue to advocate and try and make sure that government considers funding to make that happen. Some of the projects that we're doing, I've got a couple of studies, one in Balwyn and one in Camberwell, to do with accessibility, and they're documents that are going through council, which again sort of further strengthen a position from council to get out there and keep talking to the state government. Hopefully we'll get some things rolling soon, but it's quite slow to happen at the moment, and I think that's because of the funding from the state government. Go on to the next one. Bus stops. We've been gradually upgrading bus stops throughout the municipality. You see more and more stops with the tactile paving, and more with shelters and seats, but I have to be honest, not enough. We need to do more. Seating in particular, I mean, and the perspective is that you need a seat just for older people, but that's absolute nonsense. Everyone who uses public transport wants to sit, doesn't matter how able-bodied they are. So we're talking about amenity for everyone, not just those who really need to sit. It's to do with the comfort of using public transport. So we'll continue to do this sort of work and bring more seats in. I'll talk a bit more about seating a bit later. Pedestrian accessibility. Now, this is something that I do a lot of in terms of understanding how pedestrians move in a space, their behaviour, and what sort of is a challenge. And I'm not going to go through some of the obvious stuff, but I'll go through some of the more interesting stuff and different stuff. Up on that screen you can see bottom left corner. Now this is Balwyn, and this is the High Street in Balwyn, where we've got crossing points, side road crossings, and they line up nicely with a smooth tarmac, but because you've got parked cars turning all the time in them, rarely do people actually walk along the smooth surface and then they walk across the cobbles. The cobbles are designed to slow down cars and make it safer for pedestrians, but all they seem to do is act as a trip for kind of older people, let alone people in wheelchairs or anything else. So they're quite a challenge. The consideration wasn't had. We want to change that. That's going to come out in a plan that we will hopefully adopt in the coming month, and then we'll start to roll out and address each of these locations, and hopefully have some raised side road crossings so that you more or less go across at grade without kind of the ramps as well. There's also a lot of clutter around Balwyn that we need to clean up. We need to move bins out of the way, we need to take bollards away. Cars aren't really parking on the footpath on a high street kind of shopping environment, so they're all these things that aren't really necessary. We still have problems with traders putting their street furniture where they shouldn't be, especially on the building line. For the partially sighted, they follow the building line, and we still get traders putting boards and putting tables, and I'm the first to walk in there and ask them politely to sort of move them out, rather than even throwing up local laws, just because I'm there at the time, explain clearly what's needed, and they more often than not they'll listen, and I'll see it in a different place next time I pass. So in other places we've got missing footpaths, paths which are in poor condition. Top left is Cookson Street, and we're currently rebuilding that stretch. It goes from Reed Gardens all the way to the station. We've just started construction. You'll see the diggers in there now. We're keeping as many trees as we can through that environment, but then we're putting a nice surface all the way through. The one in the middle, top middle, that's around the corner. I don't know if you know this sharp corner, Reed Gardens. There's no footpath there. Everyone walks in the road because the alternative is to cross to the right along and then cross to the left. It doesn't work. There's not even drop curbs there. The cars don't use that space because they cut in tight to the corner, so why not have it for pedestrians? So we're taking away some of that carriageway and we're putting a good 2-metre path all the way around that corner. And then on the top right there is another picture from Balwyn, for example, where there are missing paths. I mean, we're actually quite blessed for infrastructure in general in Boroondara if you compare a lot of other, particularly outer municipalities, where there aren't footpaths. In a lot of the suburbs you can walk a kilometre without touching a footpath, but we still do have gaps, and we still do have areas in which we can improve. One of the things that we're doing, and we've been working closely with the Department of Transport on this, is because we've only got a certain amount of resource, a certain amount of money, it's where best to actually spend that money. And our focus points at the moment are really on giving people ease of access to the activity centres, because that's where most people will want to make trips, and also they are generally public transport hubs at those locations as well, so it's about making it easier to bring people into those locations. And it's all about only having a certain amount of finance, so how do we best spend it, which are the best corridors. We of course listen to the community, but we also look at where people are living and where people want to go to, and look at the behaviour in terms of the most likely routes that they use, and we're targeting those routes. So that Cookson Street work was part of one of the routes around Camberwell. I just want to talk a little bit about pedestrian amenity, because it's often forgotten, particularly amongst kind of engineering professionals. If they think you put a footpath there, then everyone's going to use that footpath, and we know that's not true. Amenity is about that comfort of that space, feeling safe, having shade or shelter, and having places to rest, having your dropped curbs so you can sort of get on and off the footpath, etc. On the left, that's a very early map that we did for Balwyn a few years ago, showing all the seats in good condition, seats in poor condition, and where there were missing seats, in other words, big areas, no seats at all. Interesting thing, all our seats were right in the middle of the shopping centre, but no seats helping people actually get to the shopping centre. So that's an amenity issue. That's an issue that people who aren't as confident or need to rest, they haven't got that to support them walking. I remember when I was in my teenage years, I remember the elderly couple who lived across the road, and they would walk about 1.5 kilometres to the local supermarket. They would pick up all their things, and on the way back they had all these either seats or low stone walls that would go along, and they'd have regular friends they knew, again elderly people, and they'd all be sitting on these walls like pigeons, sitting there having a chat, having a rest, and they'd pick up their bags and they'd move off to the next seat, maybe 400, 500 metres down the road, and those walls or seats helped them move, helped them gain access, and gave them that sort of physical activity, and they were comfortable doing that. And my father would offer to go in the car to pick up their shopping for them. They weren't interested, they actually liked to do that. So this was about then where else can we actually put seats in Balwyn to give people that amenity to walk, and what came out of that was another initiative which was the Walk, Rest, Talk, I think it was, in Balwyn, where the north-eastern quadrant of seats, they've already all been delivered. All the poor seats in the heart of the activity centre that needed to be replaced, they've all been replaced. But we still have seats that need to go in there, and we haven't even adopted the plan to do this yet, because it's a long process to adopt things, but we're already delivering those before we've adopted it. On the right, I just wanted a picture just to show you shade, and shade is an extremely important amenity within the context of Australia, just because it makes your walking space so much more comfortable and a lot cooler, particularly in the summer months. So whenever we do footpath improvements, considering shade, considering rest, we're not really putting water fountains in unless they're kind of really important for some reason or other. And of course you drop curbs and that sort of amenity along sort of key links to get to stations, public transport opportunities, shops, etc. So I just want to ask you about your thoughts and any questions that you might have. I'd be happy to answer them.
I live on the 109 tram line, and I just wanted to know, for example, I know that I could have just caught a tram down to here. However, as you're saying, all the footpaths are raised and so forth.
Yeah.
What's happening? I know there's a few super stops after Union Road.
Yeah.
But having said that, I don't want to go to Surrey Hills to get to Richmond because I want to come to Kew.
Yeah.
And that's a situation I imagine other people find themselves in as well.
Yeah.
And I understand that Balwyn's a very old area. I've been told that many times by many different retailers, so there's nothing they can do about that. But having said that, what are the plans in the imminent future?
Well, there are draft drawings which have been pulled together a number of years ago, but it's to treat the entire line, because ideally you don't want to just do one stop here or one stop there in isolation. You really need to do the whole corridor so people have confidence about that tram line, that they can actually get off at any location or get on at any location. The issue with that is it needs a lot of funding, and it's up there. It's one of the priorities for the state. They are treating 96 and 86 they've been spending money on, and 109 was third in priority, but we really haven't seen the sort of money coming through in terms of a commitment to actually build that. Some of it will be state, some of it could come from the federal government, depending on what funding is available, and then we would support it in terms of getting it constructed, and maybe even a contribution from the council as well.
How often does the council advocate for that?
Oh, we talk to
Do you
them all
nag
the time. Yeah, we met with someone from PTV, both myself and Jim Hondrakis, about 2-3 weeks ago, and we were talking about tram accessibility.
What's PTV?
Public Transport Victoria.
Oh, Victoria.
Yeah.
What's the cost for one stop, do you know?
It can vary, it depends on the design, but up to about 450,000 or so.
For one stop.
Yeah, some of the super stops are more $1 million in the city.
I'm
Depends
always curious to know why they're all in the city. Sorry. I mean, my theory is that it was to stop traffic going into the city and reduce the traffic rather than actually be of any assistance to the public. But
look, there is some sense in terms of where they do construct them. Sometimes it's to do with ease of being able to construct it and how easy it is to reallocate road space as well, because these things need space. But also in terms of, they have pretty good information on how busy stops are, so they try and target the stops that are the busiest. I mean, some of these stops in the city see tens of thousands of people a day getting on and off. And so these are very.
But they're able-bodied people.
Yes. No, not all of them, but generally
the percentage would be more. Sorry, we don't really need to.
The issue
debate
is
that,
the issue is you might be able to get off at those stops.
Yeah.
And you actually get on.
Yeah.
And stop further
That's
out
true.
and so, and I
That's
totally
true.
understand that.
Yeah.
But the tram accessibility is a phenomenal challenge, both in terms of funding and also in terms of reallocating that space.
Are the smart buses the ones that are the community buses?
The smart buses, no. What you've got is a kind of a radial rail line. So you've got all these radial routes, and what the smart buses are trying to do is connect in an orbital fashion around the city, and there's several of them. And they have a high level of priority, so they have priority at a lot of signals, not every signal, and they tend to have fairly good amenity at the stops as well. So they'll have slightly higher curving, tactile paving, shelters, seating, and all the rest.
I mean, I don't have a wheelchair and I don't have a problem getting around. I can still get on and off a bus.
Yeah.
But, more and more the people that I communicate with, they're sort of held up in where they live and they still want to stay there and all of those things, and they would have better facilities if they were in the city.
I mean, most of the public transport buses now are low-floor buses, and a lot of them have either suspension which will dip in the front to make it more accessible, or they'll actually have ramps which will come out. They vary a bit in terms of stock, and they also vary in terms of how good that particular stock works.
I have 3 issues I'd like to propose.
Yeah.
I'm a committee member of Balwyn and Camberwell.
Yeah.
I'm speaking for the senior citizens that is living around this area.
Yes.
One thing in Tourette Road, between number 8 tram and Camberwell Road, there's no public transport at all. I've written to the Transport Minister a few years back, but all I got is to say that there's a bus going from Camberwell through Bowen Street to Chadston, but they didn't give any answer in between that area. There are lots of senior citizens. I lived there for 40 odd years off Tourette Road. Now, when I moved there, I was one of the youngest members, but now I became almost the most senior members around the area. And I have lots of friends, they are the same, living around there. Between Burke Road and Taronga Road, off both sides of Tourette Road, there's no public transport. And also between Burke Road and Camberwell Road, there's no public transport. I saw the elderly citizen going to Taronga Road shopping, and I often pick them up and bring them home because I know their faces. And so it's okay for me at the moment, but in years to come, I don't know, I may or may not need it. But I think I'm speaking for the people at the moment. If there's some sort of public transport for that area, it would be very good. That is the first issue. And also the student going from school also, they will have to change this and that in public transport.
We'll have a look at that area.
Yeah.
I know with our buses, like for example, bus route 286, that's hugely valuable for the community, but it doesn't get a lot of patronage.
Is it?
And I use it twice a month at least to get to sites or to get to meetings.
Can Bowen Street bus go down to Taronga Village and then go back
I don't know. we'll have
or
to-
something? Just do a little bit of.
There's a lot of reasons why it might not, but we'll just have a little look at it.
Yeah.
It's just that, I mean, if we've only got a low level of patronage as well, it is challenging to sort of get that bus route upgraded and get a more regular service. The 286 bus, for example, doesn't work on the weekend, which is just not
That's right.
a good service.
I understand that there was a proposal to have the tram line extend to Camberwell Road. That was a long time ago, but whether or not it still exists or not, I wish
You know, have it. 'Cause
Yeah,
it's a gap.
the
There is
tram.
that gap for me and to go to Camberwell.
it makes a lot of difference if the tram, and also if there's an overcast from
So is that tram, which tram number? Or-
number 8 Tourette tram, finished at Glenferrie Road.
Okay.
If there's an overpass the railway line and the freeway, that would be wonderful. I think for tram or public transport, that would be very good. At the moment, in most big city on earth, why railway line going across the main road and same with Burke Road, I think that is a very important issue for our country here. Why big city with tram line going through this main road? Tourette Road is the main road. Burke Road is the main road
Yeah.
for the
It's still
city.
all Burundara.
And I think it's all Borondara. So I think that is the second issue I want to mention. The third one is
Sorry, I don't understand the second issue.
the second is the train, the railway line
Yeah.
going across Tourette Road. Can we have
So you're talking about level crossings?
an overpass for the car?
Yeah. Look, the state government is trying to
They're planning that, is it?
change some of those.
Yeah.
Where their priority is at the moment, I'm not sure.
I understand that, yes.
But it's an issue. It's not an issue.
It's a
for-
lot of money.
It's not an issue for
Foreign
public transport, but it's an issue for capacity of our roads. And
Yeah.
because we need to put more trains on,
Yeah.
the boom gates are down for a lot longer. And we recognise that is becoming an increasing problem because some of the boom gates we're seeing down for 70 or 80% of the time.
Yes.
Which means that that's quite a challenging space. It didn't used to be a problem, but now because the amount of traffic and also the amount
Yeah.
of public transport, that's starting to become an
Yeah.
issue. But there in the 20 to 60 million range, it's big money to address.